It's time to make some Hawkeye predictions, over, under, and a bunch of player props for the Iowa football team coming up this year, how I see this playing out for the individual players. We'll talk about that. Plus, David Eickholt joins us from 24/7 Sports, all today, Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Let's get into it today. We're going to have a little fun to kick off the show. David Eickholt waiting on the wings from HawkeyeInsider.com. We'll hear from David, but came up with some player props on the radio show earlier today. Myself and Ken Miller. If you miss it, you can catch us each weekday from noon until 2 on the Iowa Sports Radio Network, our flagship station, 106.3 KXNO. But you can also now hear us across the state of Iowa, up in Sioux City on 620 AM over in the Quad Cities. You can also hear us over there on 1260, 800 KXIC in Iowa City. And you can hear us in Cedar Rapids in Crystal Clear FM 95.7 in Cedar Rapids. That is the Iowa Sports Radio Network, and myself and Ken talking the world of sports from noon until 2. Plenty of Hawkeye talk over there as well each and every weekday. Well, we will get into that momentarily and hear from David Eickholt. But first, let's get into these player props. So these are props that I just came up with on my own. These are not numbers that are available. In fact, in the state of Iowa, individual player props are not available. And with it, if you're looking around, I know there were a couple of books out there, sports books out there that had some props out there. Who's going to lead the Big Ten in passing yards and rushing yards and things like that. In the state of Iowa, you didn't see any of those because individual players in the state of Iowa. It was something that was written into the law when Iowa became one of the first states to allow sports wagering. And with it, that is one of the things that is not allowed. I don't have a big problem with it. Look, I get a full slate of things to bet on. There's so many different angles that you can go, including at FanDuel, and I love that app and what we're able to do. But this is just something a little bit different. Now, I have a mind for it. If you've been listening every day, I think you guys know that I do like to dabble in the wagering world every day. But with it, so these are some numbers I think would be pretty close. If these props were out there, I think we'd be looking at pretty close to what these were. So I put first up the quarterback position. Of course, the most important position in all of sport is the quarterback position. And with Cade McNamara. So I put it over under here at the Cotton Casino, 12.5 touchdown passes this year for Cade McNamara. Now you might say, you hear that number and see it's incredibly low. Then you look at what Iowa's done offensively in the passing game the last few years, you say, not so much. Remember this, Cade McNamara, when he won a Big Ten championship, when he led Michigan to the college football playoff a couple of years back, in that season, he only threw 15 touchdowns that year. Now he completed 64% of his passes. Maybe that'd be a better prop. I took the under. And the reason I took the under, I got to see it. And we also have to see what this offense looks like. And the injury concerns. I think that's still a huge component with Cade McNamara. Under 12.5 touchdowns this year for McNamara. Up next on the prop list, we're going to take the running back group as a whole. Will any Iowa Hawkeye running back go over 850 yards this season? On this one, I took the yes. Now, if you're asking me who is that guy going to be, I don't have a great answer for you. I think everybody knows my thoughts on Caleb Johnson and the talent that's there. Let's hope that he figures everything out and gets back in the good graces, doing the right things, and is out there because I think he's incredibly talented. Kamari Moulton continues to come on, being listed as a starter here. LaShawn Williams, he's a guy, obviously, that can put up those numbers as we saw a year ago. I think somebody will get there. Who that guy will be, I don't know. And with this prop, I don't have to know. I will take yes. One Iowa running back will go over 850 yards. Let's get into some pass catchers here with some Hawkeye over-unders. Let's start with Kaleb Brown. I believe that Kaleb Brown, even after the one-game suspension that he will serve, will be Iowa's leading receiver out of the wide receiver group this year. I believe he'll lead the team in catches. I believe he'll lead the team in yards. I think he is going to be a big part of what they're doing offensively. And with the Tim Lester scheme, I think he fits incredibly well. Not trying to make him into an X receiver, a guy on the outside, using the versatility, using that skill set, using what he was at the high school level, and that was a running back, and using that skill set to make him a really dynamic playmaker on the inside for this Iowa offense. I put the number at 35.5 catches. Maybe that's a little bit low. In fact, I think it's really low. I think he is going to get well into the 40, maybe even touching 50 catches this year. I'm anticipating a big season out of Kaleb Brown. Up next, another wide receiver, and maybe the guy that finishes second behind Kaleb Brown very well could be Jacob Gill, the Northwestern transfer, who we continue to hear just how good he has been in practice. What a great camp that he has had, elevating himself into a starting role. You're going to see him a ton. Now, he has 16 career catches in his career. Let's double it up. 16 catches in his career, over under 32 catches this year. That's right. More than doubling what he's done throughout the course of his first 3 seasons on a college campus. And I think he gets there. I really do. I think this is going to be a guy that's averaging 3.5 catches a game, right in that range. We're talking regular season games only. This is over a 12-game schedule, and I would go over Jacob Gill with that number. How about Luke Lachey? Let's go touchdowns with Lachey. We know he's going to have a big season if healthy, and certainly we hope that that is going to be the case. I put 4.5 touchdowns as the over-under for Luke Lachey. Well, I took the under at McNamara touchdown passes at 12.5. Maybe Brendan Sullivan, if an injury does come, he's going to be adding to that. I still took the under number. We saw Lachey early in his career when he was splitting time and not being out there a ton in comparison to some of the other tight ends that were out there. He still found a way and had a knack to get into the end zone. Still, I took the under. I think it'll just be a shade under. I got 4 touchdown receptions this year for Luke Lachey. Let's jump over to the Iowa defense as we continue with some over-unders this year. Again, these are not available at any sports book. Don't be going to FanDuel and trying to find these. Not available in the state of Iowa. These are just ones that I came up with on my own. A year ago, we saw Jay Higgins with 171 tackles. Now, that was also including the Big Ten championship game and the bowl game. This is, again, just regular season. So I put the number at 150.5 tackles. So you got to throw the half on there, right? If we're going to hit over under, we don't want to push and everybody having to get their money back. So we put the half on there. I'm going under. Jay Higgins has been tremendous. He has been versatile. He has been a lot more than what he looked at like early in his career, where he just kind of looked like a guy. He has elevated his game to All-American status, as we heard a year ago. We're still talking about him averaging 11, 12 tackles per game. I think the ascension of Nick Jackson is going to be a piece of that. I think you're going to see a lot more playmaking ability happening all over the field. I think Sebastian Castro is going to have a big step forward. You're going to see more tackles from him, more from Xavier Nwankpa, and those totals are going to go a little bit lower this year for Jay Higgins. I'm going to go under 150.5 tackles on the season, regular season for Jay Higgins. Let's go over to the defensive line next on these over-unders, and let's go to the guy that I think is poised for a breakout season in his final go-around. That's Deontae Craig. He battled through injury a year ago. Certainly wasn't his normal self, and you saw that definitely in portions of that a season ago. But Craig is a guy that showed the ability to get to the quarterback. You go back to 2 years ago, had 7.5, and that's where I put the over-under sacks this year for Deontae Craig. Remember, this team a year ago really struggled getting to the quarterback, and Phil Parker had to dial up a lot more pressure than he has in the past a season ago to make it a little bit more difficult on quarterbacks. And very well could be the case, especially if Iowa can't find a rush specialist. You look at what Evans did a year ago, what Logan Lee did a year ago, 2 guys that are in NFL camps and doing a great job. This is going to have to be a number, I believe. If I was going to get the heights we're talking about here, I think this number needs to go over, and I'm going to go over Deontae Craig over 7.5 sacks on the season. I mentioned Xavier Nwankpa. How about this? 2.5 interceptions this year. I'm going over as well. The playmaking ability is immense. He has everything that you want in a safety. He's rangy, he's strong, and let's hope that he's healthy. I'm going to go over 2.5 interceptions this year for Xavier Nwankpa. And we wrap things up here in these fun over-under player totals, and we go to the special teams. How about this one? Drew Stevens. I didn't take number of field goals this year. That's a little cockamamie. It's hard to really come up with a real number when it comes to that. I put field goal percentage. What percentage of field goals does Drew Stevens hit this year? I put 85% as the over-under this year, and I'm leaning under. I need to see it. That Nebraska game, was brutal a year ago, not just the missed kicks, but also kicking the ball out of bounds. And of course, we know what happened at the end as Marshall Meter came in and hit the game winner against the Huskers. We know the talent is there, but when things go awry, when a kick is missed, what's going to happen? I still have some concerns, even though everything that we've heard from camp is he has been outstanding. It's different doing it in a camp as opposed to doing it in front of 70,000 fans. We'll go under on Drew Stevens. And finally, Rhys Dakin taking over the punting duties at the University of Iowa from Tory Taylor. You look at Tory Taylor and his collegiate career. This is a guy that obviously put up some monster numbers, right? 49.2 a year ago. Just absolutely ridiculous. His freshman campaign was 44 yards per punt. I put the number at 41 and a half, and I'm going to go over on that one. Now, if I pushed it to that 44 that Tory averaged in his freshman campaign, I'd go on the underside. Still, some of those concerns still sit there with him in year number one. Some over-unders for Iowa football players this year. Hey, if you got any over-unders you'd like me to tackle here in the next couple of games, send them over. You can hit us up on the YouTube page if you're watching over there in the comments section. And you can also find me on Twitter at Trent Condon is where you can find me, or at Locked On Iowa, and throw us your over-under predictions for the Iowa football season. We continue and we talk with David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports. He joins us as we roll through counting down to kickoff. It is game week, and this is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time this Labor Day has a 50% off for Diamondbacks Dodgers. There's other happening on look around for the tickets. They got you covered for the Iowa game if you're looking for tickets there. All over the place. They do a great job. I used this a year ago to get playoff tickets for the Minnesota Twins. Now, my Twins are going the wrong way. They do just such a great job. I love the ability to see exactly where you're going to see inside the field, inside the stadium. It is absolutely great. And the event cancellation protection, job loss protections. I mean, they just do so many great things for a ticket spot. All in pricing. This is something, no surprise fees at checkout. I love that element as well on the Game Time app. It is absolutely an incredible app if you're looking for any kind of ticket out there. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Locked On College, that'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, just create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is also brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. They got you covered as well. We look at game one for Iowa against Illinois State. The Hawkeyes currently are a 22.5-point favorite against the Redbirds. The over-under has trickled down a little bit, now down to 40.5 in that one. You can bet on Iowa to make the college football playoff, to win the Big Ten. You want to go big? You can bet on them to win the national championship. They got you covered at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Once again, just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Also want to let you know what we have going on. It's a busy time as we count down to kickoff, but it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. You'll get it all from Locked On stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports as we talk more Hawks.
This summer, they're more than a burger.
Get David Eickholt geared up here in just a moment, and we will talk a little bit more with David Eickholt about everything happening in the world of Hawkeye sports. Interesting element, too, of what we're looking for and what's certainly going to happen coming up here a little bit later on this week as we get ready for the game and exactly what it's going to look like when Iowa goes out there and exactly how the coaching staff is going to be set up. All right, we got David ready to go here. Locked On Hawkeyes.
Here, in fact. How do you do it on social media? The onslaught of idiots. Just, you put out an opinion, you put out a thought, and you deal in that cesspool on a daily basis.
Him and Doc are the two Hawkeye not beat guys, but Hawkeye.
How do you do it, Eickholt?
A lot of coffee. I mean, no, at this point, I've gotten a lot better at it. I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it's been a lot worse.
Yeah.
But now I just sort of put out my opinion, and then I just get to the point where, you know what? I really don't care what anybody else thinks. I put out my opinion, and I'm thankful that people at least like it or hate it or love it. I mean, people, read my opinion. I guess I'm okay with that. I'm a big fan of it, but just kind of ignore it and focus on the content at hand, and just know that it doesn't really resemble real life. On the flip side, I'm thrilled that you guys are getting my boy Steve Sipple every Thursday. That's my guy. He's been a friend of mine for probably about 10 years now.
Yeah.
He's a stellar writer. You're right. He's been doing it for what seems like ever.
I've first started having him on the radio in 1996, which was year number 1. So that was, I've known him a long time. Anyways, that's Thursday, 125. We'll say hi to him for you. What do you have for a season-long record, David? I didn't see your forecast for 2024. I'm sure you've put it out there. Where do you have the Hawks?
Yeah, so we put it out there just before I went to Nashville, and, just for the narrative to continue to be driven home, I was out of state when Kirk Ferentz had that press conference.
I saw that, yeah.
Outstanding for me, right? I have Iowa at 10-2.
Okay.
I think 9-3 should be the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I think 10-2 should be the expectation. I just really think that this is the year where they piece it all together. And I think more importantly, guys, they've gotten out of fall camp the most healthy they've been. Knock on wood, we don't want anybody getting injured on any team. This is the healthiest they've been in quite a long time. So I have them losing to, obviously, Ohio State. And then I do think they will stub their toe in another game. It took me a while to kind of talk myself into one, just because on paper I think Iowa's the better team. But as we all know, this is why the games are played. Mm-hmm. I have them losing to Wisconsin as well.
Okay. But beating Nebraska and obviously winning Cy-Hawk.
Yeah, I think Iowa State's probably an 8-4, 9-3 caliber team. I actually think Iowa State's going to be even better next season. I think that, I need to look at their schedule, but I think they could get 10 next year. Mm-hmm. I really do. I think that Matt Campbell's done a nice job with that program. But I also think a first-year coordinator who's never called plays, I'm not taking him to go into Phil Parker's house and beating them. And you got to think about this,
That's a great point, yeah.
Kirk Ferentz will be making his season debut against Iowa State.
Yeah.
So if you don't think that they're going to be extra fired up with Kirk back on the sidelines, I'd be a little bit, I'd push back a little bit on that.
With that, going through listening to Kirk yesterday at the press conference, he didn't want to make it about him not being there, those kind of things. And he has full confidence in his staff and his leadership inside that program that they're going to be fine. It's going to be weird. It's going to be interesting, but take us inside what you believe it's going to be, as we'll hear from Seth Wallace, and we'll not have Kirk Ferentz there. What do you think the mood is going to be inside the locker room, just because it's going to be so different? And I know this happens all across the country. We're just not accustomed to it in Iowa, we've had two coaches in the last 46 years with the Hawkeye football program. What do you think it's like going to be there pregame inside the locker room in Iowa City?
Yeah, for perspective, I was, I think, 3 years old the last time Kirk Ferentz wasn't on the sideline for Iowa.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to Wash-Up Walk-On Tyler Kluber earlier, former Iowa long snapper, just about the press conference yesterday, and he was asking me about what the mood was like from the players, and I told him I was very surprised how much they downplayed it. You know, I kind of assumed they would, but they really, really seemed to downplay it. And you know what that tells me? They're extra fired up. Mm-hmm. That tells me that they're trying to really push down that narrative. But, you know, Tyler said he believes that's going to be the case as well. And then he said he's jealous that he won't be able to hear Seth Wallace in his pregame speech because, you know, I've been around the program long enough. Trent, you guys have covered this program long enough. Seth Wallace is a fiery, passionate person. He is not afraid to get in somebody's face. He's not afraid to yell, showcase that emotion. I think it's going to be a very, very, I don't want to say overly emotional locker room, but I just think in terms of being passionate, getting back out on the football field, I think Seth Wallace is going to do a really, really nice job. And on top of that, it's not like I don't want to say he's being thrust in this situation. This is something that I think he's been prepared for a very, very long time. I mean, there's a reason why you got the assistant head coach title. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why they gave him a $250,000 raise, despite him being, you know, pursued by a few other Power 2 programs. I'm sorry, I call it Power 2 because a Big 10, SEC are top 2. Big 12, I think, is number 3. ACC is number 4. But I think it's going to be a very, very fired up locker room, and I think they're going to come out ready to go. I don't think that they're really going to stub their toe, and they should. They're going up against a team that has not scored a single point against an FBS team in the last 3 matchups.
So let's get ahead of ourselves when it comes to Seth Wallace, and I'm with you. I thought he was the heir apparent, but when the time comes, and I hope that that's not anytime soon. I'll put that out there. But now it's Beth Goetz's athletic department. Does this change things in your mind as far as if they stay internal, or does she look outside? Does she hire a search firm? Let's fast forward to when that point comes, because it's going to come at some point. Is Wallace the overwhelming favorite in your mind, or have things changed in that regard?
I would say he'd stand a chance. I don't think that it would be like a situation like when Lisa Bluter stepped down. It was obvious that Jan Jensen needed to step in. There was nobody else that should have even been looked at, just because of the history together and all that. And yes, there's a lot of coaches in Iowa's program that have been there a while. But this is where I push back as well. And I think Beth Goetz would be doing a great disservice to Iowa by not seeking out other, you know, potential candidates, because I would argue that coaches look higher about the Iowa coaching job. They look higher upon it than the casual fan. I think that the Iowa coaching job is probably a top 15 coaching job in the country. I think because of the great stability, the fan base, the NIL, I still think is a work in progress. I think Brad Heinrichs has done a very, very good job with that. I think he really took his time and did things the right way. And I think that they are in a good spot, at least in terms of competing in the Big Ten. But you just look at all the facets. I think that Iowa would be a job that a lot of, you know, Power 4 coaches would strongly consider leaving for, because you got to think about this. What if you go to Iowa, you get 8-4, 9-3 record every year?
Yeah.
Long story. And guess what? Everybody's happy if you get into a playoff once every 4 to 5 years. And, you know, coaches love stability in a not so stable business. I think it would make a lot of sense. So I think Seth Wallace would certainly be a candidate, but again, I also think Iowa would be doing a great disservice if they did not seek out other candidates.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. As we get ready for the season, the big talk over the last couple of weeks has been quarterback position, what we saw at Kids Day. David, I know you got some sources and some rumblings that bounce around. What have you heard about the improvements? What has been done over these last couple of weeks, most importantly in the passing game, and getting Cade McNamara, get that rust shaken off of him and getting him ready to go for game 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cade really separated himself just in terms of being the most consistent. I think he had a couple of long touchdown passes in Iowa's last kind of scrimmage practice. They'd one to Caden Wheaton, one to Addison Ostrenga. Some guys did some different things as well. But I think, you know, ultimately, if Brendan Sullivan had been on campus in January, I think this would be his starting job. That's not from sources. That's just from my opinion. I think if he really got a chance to continue to learn the offense, I think he would have had a better shot at taking the job. But I think Cade's really just fired up and getting ready to get back. And another thing I look at, and this is something I think is overlooked, you got to look at cadence in the huddle. Look at leadership. How do you fire up the guys? It showed me a lot that Cade McNamara was voted captain again this season. because he missed so much of the offseason. He missed so much time last year. It would have been very easy for him to kind of hop off the wagon. But the fact that he's been voted by his teammates again to be a team captain tells me that he's really been in the trenches. He's been in the locker room. He's the guy who's put in a lot of work, and he knows how to fire up his teammates, and he clearly has a lot of respect from them. So that's something that really stood out to me. So I'm very curious where he's going to be at. But more importantly, what happens when Cade McNamara gets hit for the first couple of times? Does that shake up his mechanics? Or does he just realize that this is football and this is a game that he's played for most of his life? That's going to be the big teller for me.
Well, we may find out on Saturday, or at some point we're going to for sure. I want to ask you about Rhys Dakin, because this is a name that's starting to really start to percolate a little bit. Not a lot of talk about him. Obviously, he's a freshman, so you wouldn't expect a ton of talk. But listening to Ferentz yesterday, sounds as though that he expects that he's going to play this year, and it's going to be more than the 4 games. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I interpreted what Ferentz said. But what's the ceiling, I guess, David, for Rhys Dakin, the 6'4" freshman receiver?
Yeah, I think that's a guy that stood out to me in that fall open practice as well. I mean, he had a couple strong catches, and you talk about Iowa, what they've really needed. I think they've needed a pure X receiver. I don't think they've really had one since Brandon Smith. I think they've been throwing a couple of guys there, and yes, there's been mixed success. I think Brody Brecht, had he continued to play football, everybody understands why he went baseball, right? Nobody's questioning that. But I think Brody Brecht was going to be that pure X. But I think Rhys Dakin is that sort of X. So I'll be very surprised if he really redshirts, because at this point, who can you afford to redshirt in the wide receiver room? You have to find guys that are going to be able to go out there and make some plays. I think Rhys Dakin is going to be a very good target in the red zone. I think he can make some sideline catches. I think him and Jerry at Bowie is another guy I've heard really good things about. But at the same time, when are we going to see Iowa really utilize the wide receivers in attack? Are they going to wait till Iowa State? Because I'll tell you, I'll be surprised if Iowa throws more than 18 times against Illinois State. I think they're going to go in there. I think they're going to run the ball 45 to 50 times with all those running backs. And they're just kind of, once they get through it, but they're not going to really showcase this quote-unquote new offense under Tim Lester. I just don't think we're going to see a lot of craziness. I think they're going to be productive, and I think the running backs are going to be very, very good. I think the O-line will get some confidence before they go into Iowa State. But Rhys Dakin is a guy that I think if he continues to improve over the course of the year, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And from what I've heard behind the scenes and from what I saw firsthand at that open practice, I see why he's getting snaps, and I see why he's on that 2 deep.
The structure of this game, it's game 1. There's always a set of issues. You couple it for the first year, we'll have communication in the head side. All right, there's something else. Now you're down 2 coaches, the head coach, Kirk Ferentz, along with Jon Budmayr, your wide receiver coach, who I would anticipate either would have been another eye in the sky or one of the offensive coaches on the sideline. Regardless, you got to do that. And when Kirk was kind of asked about it, he's like, we'll figure it out. I don't know. I was a little bit surprised there. I thought maybe we'd hear about a grad assistant, somebody that was going to be stepping into one of those roles. We didn't. What was your takeaway from that? Because I thought Kirk would be at least a little bit more forthright of kind of the way this is going to go, because this is a lot of firsts and a lot of changes for the first game of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you brought that up, because I actually asked Jacob Gill about what the plan was at wide receiver, and he basically said that Jon Budmayr is going to be out. So it's going to be Tim Lester coaching the wide receivers along with offensive graduate assistant Tanner Kruger. So I was a little bit surprised that Jacob Gill said that, just considering that Kirk Ferentz really wasn't tipping his cap, tipping his hand. But that's what Jacob Gill told a couple of the media members. I tweeted that out. So I was a little bit, on edge when Kirk said there was no real plans. But I'd be really hard-pressed to believe that they don't have this already in place. And quite frankly, I think it would be a tad irresponsible had they not. I think those plans are going to be in place. But yeah, so I think Tanner Kruger and Tim Lester are going to just kind of share that wide receiver role.
What happens if Drew Stevens misses a couple of kicks to start the season?
I think you got to leave him in there. I mean, I'd just be very stunned to see that happen, because from everything I've been told by people inside and outside the program, Drew Stevens has had a tremendous fall camp. I mean, I'm talking
same thing.
Very, very, very few misses. I think their final close scrimmage, he missed 1, but hit like the other 10 he attempted. And the one that he missed, he redid immediately. and drilled it right down the middle, and it was a long kick. So I don't want to say it's impossible to happen, but I will be very, very surprised. I think Drew Stevens is going to come back with a vengeance. And, I think Iowa's just kind of hoping they don't have to use Drew Stevens as much outside of extra points and kickoffs.
That's David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports joining us, and appreciate the time of David Eickholt. A good insight into Iowa football as we get ready for the matchup against Illinois State. Of course, it's going to look different. No Kirk Ferentz on the sidelines. We're going to tackle that. Plus, Caitlin Clark does it again as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. How about when you're watching sports? Grab a 5-hour energy shot to stay alert and watch all your favorite games. Or if you stayed up late watching that intense overtime game, take a 5-hour energy shot in the morning so you can start your day. It's what I do after a long night. I'm a night owl, and definitely something I like to take a look at. 5-Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted now for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5-Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5-Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code, it's Locked On CFB, to receive 20% off your order. Locked On CFB, 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and make sure you use that code Locked On CFB to receive 20% off your order. That's 5hourenergy.com today. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. What a performance out of Caitlin Clark. Sets another record, the rookie record for 3-pointers. No surprise that one goes down. But beating Connecticut. And if you watched them earlier this season against Connecticut, it wasn't pretty. Just physical domination in that game. You see Caitlin Clark continuing to just do her thing, and she is so outstanding. It's been absolutely incredible to see and what she's been able to do with this team, getting them now nearly back to the 500 mark. They looked almost locked into the playoffs now. Maybe can send as high as number 4 in the playoffs, which is just absolutely incredible. You watch this Indiana Fever team for the first couple of weeks, but us Hawkeye fans, it's no surprise. We talked to David there, and he mentioned Tanner Kruger is going to be the grad assistant that's going to be helping out with Budmayr out of this game. All the shuffling around. Seth Wallace now becomes the interim head coach, the one-game head coach with Kirk Ferentz on the sideline for this one. Tim Lester is going to be up there. No Jon Budmayr on the sideline. This is going to be a lot of shifting, and it's one of the reasons I asked David exactly how this is. Now, they'll figure it out. It's not going to be, running around out there with chickens with their heads cut off. I don't think you're going to see anything like that. This program's too buttoned up, but it is something to keep an eye on. I want to see that communication inside the headset, exactly how that looks. I know some different programs are doing different things of who's going to be the person talking. Is it the offensive coordinator? Is it the quarterback coach? Is it another offensive coach? Is it even a head coach at different times? And what is going to happen with Iowa? What is going to be a different look than in week number 2. Going to be fun. We have to go on record officially. We did over-unders today with some player props. We have to make our official season prediction for 2024. We will do that, and still working on one more big piece potentially coming the way here on Locked On Hawkeyes. You want to keep it loaded, locked and loaded with us each and every day. That's right. We got you covered every day, talking the world of Iowa Hawkeyes. And thank you for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.